Without further ado, I think it'd be great for us to go into our first question today, which is, why do Catholics worship Mary? Why do Catholics worship Mary? And I think this is one of the things, like particularly when I go out on the streets and I speak to our evangelical brothers and sisters, and they say to me, "Why do you Catholics worship Mary?" So is that true? Do we worship Mary?
Well, obviously the answer to the question, do we worship Mary, is no. One of the things about the word worship is, like many words, words develop and evolve over time, and the word worship has evolved, and in the past it used to mean something more equivalent to honor or to kind of esteem somebody, and you still see that with like certain titles across in England of people who hold civic offices will be called their worship or so on. Anyway, we don't worship Mary in the sense that we use it now, which is the honor which is due to God alone. So we absolutely do not worship Mary, but we do honor her. We don't honor her as God. She's not God. She's a human being. She's one of God's creatures, and worship is due to God alone, as we use the word worship now. But we honor her, and we honor her greatly. And the reason why we honor her greatly is no other reason simply than that God himself honored Mary so greatly. God himself chose to honor her in a unique and singular way that he's honored no other human being. He chose to use Mary, use her freedom to say yes or to say no, to enter into this world. He used her flesh to take flesh, and so to join us in our humanity. Mary has been honored by God so greatly. God himself entrusted himself completely to Mary. And so we honor Mary as a sign of gratitude, but primarily because it's what God does. God honors Mary, and so we do too.
No, that is really good, Father Sean. And it's amazing to see that often I think this idea of worship, I think, comes from the idea that I know they'll say to me when I'm in the street, they'll say, "Yeah, but do you not pray to Mary?" And I think it's that idea of, well, what our understanding of prayer is. And I think, so maybe you could maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I suppose one of the difficulties could be, well, there's two things. One, it's like to do with the way that Catholic culture works. Now, if you're not from Catholic culture, some of the things that Catholics do could come across as though they're worship, because they're very similar to the way that we would treat God. So, for example, it wouldn't be uncommon to see a Catholic light a candle in front of a statue of Mary, or to kneel down when saying their prayers to Mary, for example. And those things, it's understandable why they could come across to somebody who's not a Catholic as though it was worship rather than mere honor. So I can have a certain sympathy for that. But here it is, fundamentally, this is the issue, is that the times have changed. In the past, at the time of Jesus even, it wasn't permitted to make any kind of image of God. And so the way that God was honored was completely different, because for the Jews at that time, in the time of the Old Testament, God was somebody completely transcendent. And I'm not saying that God no longer is transcendent. Of course, God is transcendent. But the thing is, by transcendent, I mean completely other, completely, so different to us as human beings that we could not make an image of him. Created reality couldn't reflect who God is. And yet now, because God himself has taken on human flesh through the incarnation, God's become one of us, we can. And that's why that kind of culture has changed. And I think that can be one of the difficulties that maybe some of our evangelical brothers and sisters have, is they don't always recognize the extent to which things have legitimately changed now. Because God's taken on human flesh, we can make not simply an image of God, we have images of Jesus, God made man, but we also therefore will have images of the saints and so on, who are part of God's body, the body of Christ. And yeah, so we'll honor those particular individuals and sometimes honor them through the statues. But times have changed, and what I would say is this: I have some sympathy for how they might feel that way, but it's always important when we're talking to Protestants, and I hope when they're trying to talk to us as well, that we start from a position of trying to understand each other and not trying to impose onto the other, oh, well, you think this, or your mind frame is like this, and actually to ask the other person, well, what is it you really think, and why do you think that about the other person, and to actually come to a level of understanding.